Okay, great. Okay, thank you everybody again. So yeah, we're going to be sharing today about product development and clinical teams and how to best work together. So this is going to be our agenda for today. We're going to be chatting a little bit about, we're going to be doing introductions really quickly with myself as well as the panelists. And then we're going to go ahead and dive into the actual panelists, different products that they've worked on, the roles that they've had, as well as the roles that they've collaborated with. And then we're going to dive in a little deeper more into the actual cross collaboration, what that actually looked like, how they navigated that with different teams. And then we'll close out with a few key takeaways. And then lastly, go into questions and answers. Cool. Can everyone hear me okay? Are we good? Just getting vibe check. Okay, great. Awesome. So yeah, first we'll just start off with some sort of grounding as like what it is that we're trying to focus on for this session, just to kind of like set the right stage for ourselves and everyone else that's on here. So first and foremost is that this will be a focus around individuals with either a psychology background and or in clinical roles. You'll kind of notice as to why we're making a differentiation as we start speaking more, but right, you don't necessarily have to be in a clinical role to playing some sort of having some sort of impact on how psych is being incorporated into a product, for example. Secondly, it's we're going to be focusing on delivering product. And the reason we put product there in sort of like quotation is that especially a lot of times I think, product can just be seen as sort of like an app that's launched. But also, right, there's a lot that goes into a product actually being able to be used and to be successful, right? There could be a lot of projects that go into that. There could be different programs that support that product. There could be different processes that help enable that product to be successful. And then lastly, right, there's an actual product that could be shipped like an app or something to that extent. So we're going to be focusing across the full spectrum there. So you can imagine it as just like, how can someone in some kind of clinical role or with a psych background come in and just be a really great cross-collaborative partner in one of these various spectrums? And then lastly is that we're going to be focusing, as I mentioned already, on cross-functional collaboration. So that'll be both internally and externally. And by internal, right, it means individuals that are a part of your company. It could be a product manager, an engineer, a marketing person. But then also externally, it could be users, different patients that maybe you speak to, sales organizations that you're engaging with, people that you're trying to get partnerships with, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be focusing on sort of both of those ends. So this is what we're trying to ground our sort of full presentation around. So starting off with introductions, my name is Mike Valdez Landeros. I've been in tech for about 15 years now. I've held various different roles, including product, marketing, and operations. And sort of a bit dissimilar from most people in therapists in tech, I'm actually currently getting my master's in counseling psychology to become an LMFT. And sort of this whole presentation started out of someone in our Slack group really mentioning that they had just launched a new product. I don't really know what launching a psych focus or clinical product looks like. And so I kind of just reached out to that individual, asked them more questions. And out of that came this idea of like, why don't we just put a presentation together in an event and share that in a much more broader sense. So, and I'll be sort of just guiding and navigating our conversations. Karen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, it's my pleasure to be here. My name is Karen Andrea Stefan. I am the co-founder and CEO of Earkick. Earkick is a deep tech AI startup in mental health. I'm Swiss Colombian, so I have a mixed background, and I am serial founder, which means when I was in my early 20s, I was still a professional musician at that time. I founded my first company because there were issues with getting the job I wanted. So I just founded the company myself because I wanted to work in that. I held it for 20 years. Then I switched to business psychology, studied business psychology. I also studied digital transformation and digital management. And out of this, I realized I have to found again. That was Earkick. And yeah, I'll never stop founding because there's so many things that we need to tackle. And I learned that it needn't be something that you're a super expert in. You just need to have the guts to do it. The product is Earkick and mood and anxiety tracker that I'm going to talk about a little later. And also the Earkick enterprise platform that we are building now. That's me.
Thanks, Karen. Patricia?
Yes, thank you, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia. I am the Director of Digital Wellbeing at Pure Health Exchange. I also am a mental health consultant with the Steve Fund. My fun fact there is I love concerts. I've been to over 50. I'm not a musician like Karen, but I do really love music and the art of music. I went to a concert last night. And I'm going to be talking about Self-See Communities, which is a mental health and sexual health resource specific, dialogue specific app for young people ages 13 to 18.
Thank you, Patricia. And Jacqueline.
Hi, my face looks so big on there. I'm Jacqueline. I'm the Director of Perinatal Mental Health Care at Pomelo. I'm also the Director of Therapists in Tech. What I love is all rap music, especially early 2000s and late 90s. So that's like a fun fact about me. And I'm gonna round the panel out and just discuss my experience working with engineering teams and other collaborative personnel within a startup to build a clinical product.
Awesome. So now that we know our panel and what they'll be focusing on and their roles, we're going to kind of dive a little deeper in now and just actually have them share a little bit about their products as to get some context as to what the products do, but then also write the roles that they've had to play in shaping those products. So Karen, over to you first for Earkick.
Yes. So our mission is to make mental health measurable. We focused on anxiety first, stress and anxiety. And the reason why is that you all know people often get caught by surprise. They don't understand that what they're feeling and going through has to do with a mental health issue. And we always say there's 30,000 mental health apps out there, but it's like having 30,000 diets and no scale. It's difficult for a single person, also for companies and organizations to really measure mental health in real time. And we came up with an idea of a real-time tracker that collects your own data and then is able to give you real-time interventions and actionable suggestions. That's what we're after. What it does. Okay, so we started with a very simple product because our philosophy is that you ship the most basic thing in the beginning. Think you want to build a flying car, but what you're going to get out in the beginning is a skateboard. So it does the job of going from A to B, but it's not yet a flying car. So we launched a very simple app in the beginning. It was very highly rated from day one onwards, and it was still very manual. So you have to actually put in, how you feel and et cetera, no AI in there yet. And we focused on making it in a way that people really love it and they adhere to it. We had no special audience in mind because it's completely anonymous. So there's no login. We don't know who's on the other end. But from different tests, we know that it's mostly young people between, let's say, 12 and 30, 35 who use the app. And so we had to adapt the language a bit. Yeah, we had to adapt things, but basically what it will do when the AI is implemented in about 1 or 2 weeks, it can automatically recognize how you're doing by measuring your biomarkers, your voice, your visual, your behavior, internal, external factors. And it's all computed on edge, like on the phone itself. It gives you very, very nice stats. You can zoom in, zoom out. There's lots to talk about that, but that's basically what it does. It gives you the overview over your anxiety, over your own trend to your baseline, and it gives you a lot of correlations. So, you know, maybe moon phases or the stock market influence your mental health. You can learn how to establish good habits. You can break bad habits. There's a content section and much more. So it's basically something that somebody can carry on their phone, and it'll help the therapy. It'll help the self-help. And it's a good tool to always revisit when something is not clear and when you want to progress in something. My roles, yes.
Yeah, no,
So
yeah.
my roles, well, as a co-founder, you basically wear all the hats that you can find. But maybe most relevant for this event today is that I did a lot of research, not just research like academically. I wrote a thesis on therapists in the ear, but mainly research with real people. Yeah, I did tons of interviews with patients, with non-patients, with other therapists, you name it. And I did a lot of social listening, which means you go on social media, go on all kinds of channels, and you try to really understand the persona on the other end, what they like, what they don't like, what they like about current apps or current solutions, what they dislike. I also drove the whole story, you know, from scratch, the look and feel of the app, together with my co-founder, who's designing it, who's the CEO, he's the CTO and CPO, so many hats. And we together built the team. So we basically hired people in domains that I don't know well. And I made sure to hire people that are way more intelligent than I and have skills that I don't even dream of having. So those were my roles.
Thank you, Karen. We'll move over to Patricia to talk a little bit about Self-See.
Thanks, Mike. So Self-See is a product that's launched within the organization Pure Health Exchange. And Pure Health Exchange's mission is to build healthier communities with young people. So together we create education opportunities for peers to share the tools and resources young people need to make healthy decisions. And like the organization does this in a number of ways. So we have our school-based sector where they go into schools in the community. We have near peers who are health facilitators who deliver curriculum. We have 2 sets of curriculum that's delivered to schools through our community partnerships. And then we have our Youth Innovation Lab, which is really focused on the digital components to scaling our reach to young people across the nation. So we have selfsee.org, which is the web app. We have Self-See Communities, which is the mobile app. And then we have our TikTok content, which we have been building up over the last 2 years. So what Self-See does, as mentioned in my intro, it is an app for young people ages 13 to 18 to engage in topic-specific and identity-specific discussion forums with other peers. We also have trained volunteers who are near peers, so between the ages of 18 and 24, who facilitate the conversation, provide resources when relevant, and just also provide general support. But really what we are seeing with the app and what we've seen in our pilots and what we want to further encourage is that young people are also experts. So we want them to have a safe space where they can talk about what's going on, get access to resources through our partnerships and through our very carefully vetted resource process, and also provide support to one another. It's something that was noted during our pilots that young people really liked providing their own expertise and supporting each other. And so some of those communities discussions that we have right now, we have 8, and we're looking to launch more. And all of this is done with young people in mind. So some of our communities that we have right now is LGBTQIA mental health, BIPOC mental health, identity, sex, and relationships, navigating through grief and loss, anxiety and stress. So a lot of different topics there. So my role, I wear many different hats at PHE, which is great. But when I came on, it was to provide really a mental health perspective and to oversee what our restorative moderation approach would look like, to ensure that our community agreements were made sense for the young people who are utilizing it. I oversee the content moderation. So something about Self-C is that everything is pre-moderated. Because we work so closely with young people to build a product specifically for them, we take their opinions into mind and we create features and we update things surrounding that. So with my team of content moderators, we review every single post and comment that a young person submits, and then it gets approved or denied. They'll receive a message as to why it was denied, to engage in the restorative moderation process, to provide a form of education as to why their post wasn't approved, and then they have the opportunity to resubmit it again. I also co-lead one of our youth engagement groups called Youth Design Group, which is where we'll bring specific features to them so that they can tell us if this is a yay or a nay. We'll also work with them to learn more about what they want and what they want to see for mental health needs for their peers and themselves, so we can see how we can make that come to life. And also, again, just taking their opinions. So they're the ones who named Self-C, they're the ones who told us what communities for us to launch with, they picked the logo. We work very, very closely with our target demographic.
Awesome. Thanks, Patricia. And then Jacqueline will jump over to you for some more general details here on both the roles and then also who they tend to collaborate with and what that looks like.
Yeah, so like currently at Pomelo, I am working in an interdisciplinary, like a women's health clinic, but it's all virtual. And so we are building everything from scratch. And so for myself, when I'm thinking about how to identify birthing persons who need mental health care, I'm trying to figure out how can I build something that is going to capture all the data that I need and spit it out in a way that would translate to like an NCQA measure, or just prioritizing HIPAA, making sure that the tools that we're using in order to build something that we can ship immediately to our patients. Some of them are things that are just like, another tech term is like off the shelf. So maybe using like a Typeform or Google Sheets, and then being able to share that with like a product manager who in my organization is an engineer, but that doesn't mean that it has to be an engineer, but at my organization, that person is an engineer. So bringing that information to them and talking to them in a way to get them to understand like the clinical significance of why things need to be the way they are. So typically roles involved will be any clinical role, a clinical operator, a researcher, chief clinical officer, in collaboration with marketing, other operations, maybe business, product like we talked about, and then also collaborating with the patients and other clinicians, volunteers, just making sure that you're getting a good read on, and I like what Karen said, I think she said like social listening, just understanding what this community needs, the community that I'm serving clinically.
Great, thanks, Jacqueline. I think maybe to just round out this section, like, right, I think we're hearing a lot of very recurring themes, like a lot of, everyone here is at different stages, right? We have like a founder, we have someone who's sort of like at a director level and sort of working across whether it's like birthing versus like youth. And across all of them, I'm hearing a lot about right, listening to your users and sort of understanding from them and figuring out how to translate that back to teams internally, setting up different operations, trying to figure out ways to make things more efficient in a way that makes sense for your clinical teams, but then also can be translated to your product teams to find the right level of measurement. There's a lot of, I'm trying to sort of tie together that there's a lot of similarities, even though the role, the target populations, and even the scope of those roles are totally different. Cool. So next, jumping into, so now we're going to dive into a little more deeply into that actual cross collaboration and what that actually looks like. In preparation for this, like we had every now and then had referred it to as like the dance between you and your various cross-functional stakeholders who are involved. Karen also had a really great analogy in relation to jazz and having to improvise and sort of move along in different ways. But I'm going to go ahead and just let Karen, you kick it off with sharing with us a little more details about, a little bit about that role that you played, and then how those other cross-functional partners helped you succeed in what you were trying to do, and maybe one example of that.
Yeah, sure. It always looks easy and makes sense in hindsight. But when you are doing something from scratch, it means that it's going to have to be different, and it has to work for the end user. And that is really difficult because you are mostly wrong. And that's something that I didn't know from my previous life, from my studies. There was always something that you could look up. But when you are founding a company, there is no blueprint. There is no ready answers, because you're trying to disrupt a field, and you're going to have to imagine something that happens in the future. There's no one you can run to. But research is something that helps a lot, because you go and you observe. You do what you all did during your studies, but now it's not a topic that your professor gave you. It's real world, right? And the research needs to be very thorough. You always have to doubt yourself, and you always have to make the first step. So what I mean by that is you have a hypothesis about what people are going to like, for example, or what they need. And out of all the many things that you can do, you have to go decide for one or two and test them. So you're not going to go out and ask people, what do you want? They don't know what they want, or maybe they don't know how to express themselves. So you have to get into a conversation where something crystallizes. It can be something like they are trying to cope, or they're trying to solve a problem like the tracking on their own way. Maybe they do it on pen and paper, and then you ask them about that and why, until you have an idea what they actually need and how tech can help. And that takes quite some time, especially when you cannot reach out to your real audience because they're anonymous, right? So social listening was one thing. Then the story, you have to construct a story that you believe in, but that's not carved in stone. So you're always going to, write a chapter and then see whether everyone can follow, right? What you want to do and what you want to show. Then you show that story idea to your co-founder or designer, to the engineers. And that's, even if it's only 3 or 4 people, there's a lot that you have to explain and go back and forth until it feels like we're all on the same page. And then comes the most important person, that is the customer. And they are going to vote with their attention. So you're going to do a lot of tests, and that's not calling people. It's actually throwing out and launching a product very early and then testing every bit of it. How long does someone, stay on the first frame? When do people leave? What do they stay on longest? What content do they like most? And then you have to rearrange, redesign everything based on data. It's not about whether you like it, whether you like the color. It's all about what the end user likes. And that's something that can sometimes feel quite frustrating, because you have to iterate, and you're basically flying in the dark because you can't really talk to these people. But then the first reviews come in, people reach out because they can reach out to us, and then they tell you that you saved their lives, or that you touched them in a way that nobody else could, and that they like this and that, and then it starts coming to life, and that's when the magic starts. That's basically where I was, or I'm still at, with my co-founder, who is heading the AI and also the development. Now, usability tests using video means that people who volunteer to do that, they actually film themselves, they videotape themselves while they're using the app, and they make commentaries. And you can learn so much from that. But you have to be a very, very curious, massively curious observer and really walk in the shoes of these people. A/B test is for looking, what works best. You do that all virtually. Everything is actually done virtually and very little face-to-face or with talking to real people. Then collaborations with engineers, design, product. The problems that we have on our people side are very different from technical problems. So I may well imagine, I want to see this and that, but all the steps that you have to take care of, everything, for example, we have a lot of haptic in there. We have a lot of magic happening. I don't know how to describe it. And the developer needs to kind of feel what I mean when I say I want something warm. I want the person to feel safe. How do you translate that into development, right? Into code. And that takes a lot of kind of getting on the same page. And then the machine learning AI is something that I only understand it at the surface. And to really collaborate with these guys, you have to expose yourself to and be very interested in how they see the world. To give you one example, our machine learning guys who work with the data, they can position someone in a multi-dimensional room of data. So they can cluster people based on whether they have anxiety and maybe bad habits and the weather is such and such, and they can put someone else in another cluster. And this is so much data, so much correlation, so much of all of that deep stuff that you have to really open up and really do your homework in understanding what they say. And then I get the story out of it. For example, I understood that people on Saturdays do usually not log. So I can write content about why Saturday is such a special day. Or we know, for example, that that people have anxiety most on Wednesdays. So you can start catering to that and writing a story, giving content, giving support through what you learn from AI without having spoken to one single person. And that's how the collaboration is a back and forth between people who know people well, people who know technology well, people who know product well, development well, and people who know communication well. Sometimes it's just 3 people juggling all the hats, and sometimes it's a huge team, but it's always the same job. You have to walk in their shoes, get out of their shoes, walk in other shoes, put on a hat, take off a hat, and never, never, never take anything personal, because you're not going to make it for a long time if you take things personal in tech. Yeah.
Thanks, Karen. I know we have a few slides that you added in for some.
Yeah, just to visualize. So this was the skateboard number 1. We just did the design. We did ourselves, actually my co-founder, and it's very bare, like really just the barest ever. And then the next iteration looked like this, because we found out that people are young, diverse, especially we have a lot of people from minorities. So we thought, oh, maybe, and a lot of them seem to be women, maybe they want to see themselves. So we have a girl and it kept changing colors of skin and hair. They hated it. So data showed that they hated it. And you can see it in a tool where you see how they drop off after 1 or 2 frames, right? So again, you trash it. And it took a while, you can go to the last one, until we came up with a panda. And it's a panda that has a scar over his heart. He's a mental health warrior, and he has a star in his ears because he has goals and he can achieve those goals. And all these elements are then built into the app and into the story. And that's just a very small example of how different it becomes when you really listen to data and when you put your ego aside and your opinions aside and you let the customer and data speak. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Karen. Cool. Patricia, you want to jump in and also share roles and then also what that collaboration has looked like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as mentioned before, my role is really providing a mental health perspective to the role. I've been dabbling in trust and safety and content moderation. It's really a combination of a lot of different things there, and overseeing our volunteer experience and content moderation, because I mean, we could have as many users as we want, right? But if the folks who are also doing this work every day aren't satisfied, aren't feeling like they're being well taken care of, then the product's not a success. Everyone who has hands in this needs to be included here. And so also the really great thing about the work that I do and within the Youth Innovation Lab is that we are always innovating, hence the name. And so we're looking for new ways to make this product reach our target audience and have it actually meet the needs that they want. So as mentioned, we collaborate with various folks. We collaborate with an external tech team. They are the ones who help build out the actual platform. We don't have anything, we have somebody in-house who like oversees the tech process, but when it comes to actually building out, we work with a company called Sidebench, and we meet with them weekly to talk about what are the features that we want, what are the bugs that we've noticed, and then they work in their sprints to meet those demands and asks. Additionally, our biggest collaborators are young people. We cannot have an app for young people without getting their input, without checking in to see what it is that they want and what they need. As mentioned here, I have our volunteers, our content moderators, and I have the VP of Digital Impact, which is Lisa, who's been overseeing this work from its inception in 2020. But it's really my entire digital well-being, digital impact team at Pure Health Exchange that we're collaborating with to make this a success. So as I mentioned, young people collaborated in very different ways. They continue to collaborate on how we bring Self-See to life and iterate on it. Again, they helped us with the features. They picked the name, the logo, the 7 communities that we launched with. We also have a list of 13 additional communities from their brainstorming. They give us feedback. We did a pilot period where they were like, the mentors feel a little bit too clinical. Like, I want to feel like I'm talking to a person and not a robot. And so we took that feedback back and we updated the training on how we have our mentors respond to young people on the app. With our tech team, as I mentioned again, it's identifying new features, working through the bugs, and centering what the user experience is. Through the screenshots on my previous screens, you probably saw that it's colorful. There's a Y2K theme to it because that's what's really popular to young people. That's what they really resonate with. And to give you a really clear example on how we brought in both our tech team and our young people with a feature is next week, we're going to be launching a new feature of the app because we identified that there's probably like a barrier to access. Right now, in order to see what Self-See is about, you have to sign up for an account. And we're like, I don't know how many people are actually going to sign up for an account, but they have no idea what it looks like. We don't have any online tutorials. Additionally, we're like, I wonder how we're going to get adults to recommend an app that they can't even see in, right? Because there's an age restriction. So if an adult puts their real birth year, you're not going to be let into Self-See. So a workaround this is we are launching carousels, which when you download the app, you'll have 3 screens that you'll be able to slide through, and it'll tell you what the different aspects of Self-See are. So it'll tell you like if you want to access our resources, and young people will be able to access those resources without creating an account. So they don't have to feel like that's a barrier to access. Then the next screen will be like preview Self-See communities. And so they'll be able to see some of the community names. I think they might be able to see like 1 to 2 posts and conversations that are happening within it. And then the third screen will be sign up for Self-See. So now they'll have an idea of what Self-See is before they sign up. And the way we worked with our tech team and our users around this is we went to our tech team and we were like, we got to put screens together before you actually access the app so we can limit this barrier to access. Then our UX designer who's working with Sidebench was like, I got you. And then she came back and she was like, here are 3 like frames that I've created for it to be a carousel. And we're like, this is great. Like, I love the colors. And then we took it to our young people and we brought to them the different options of the screens and we brought them the copy. We had various, we had 3 different copy that was going to go on each screen. And so we brought it to a team of young people and we were like, what do you think of the screens? What do you think of the colors? And what do you think of the copy? And young people gave us our feedback. We were able to synthesize that feedback and come up with what's going to be the final version of the carousel next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Patricia. And then lastly, we're going to jump over to Jacqueline. I know we're kind of running towards time to get into the Q&A, but Jacqueline, I'll let you kick it off and then we'll move into Q&A.
Yeah, so for an example, like right now I'm working on how to pull out all of the data from which one of our patients were pregnant or trying to get pregnant or postpartum. If they saw my screener that I sent, did they complete it? If they viewed it, did they fall off? And so we had to determine, like, how could we build this in a way that it can basically spit out the data that we need. So working with engineering, I know how to use Google Sheets very well. They're like, put all the data in there, Jacqueline. And then when you're ready, like, send it to us, we'll like make a pivot table and do all the things. And I'm like, great. So that's one way, one thing. And then also marketing, color scheme, language, copywriting, all of those things. Marketing typically is fabulous about that stuff. So anytime like we're thinking about like wording, like for info that goes in the app or even like an opening page, like marketing is always good for that. And then user research, it could look different at different companies, but previously when I was at Mindstrong, we worked a lot with user researchers because we had built our own proprietary product that the patients were using, and we wanted to make sure that the patient's experience was like crisp and valuable, and also, just measuring for drop-offs, just engagement, things like that. So I'm gonna wrap it up there so we can open up for questions.
Cool, thanks, Jacqueline. I'll close out with these like really high level takeaways that we kind of grouped together according to kind of where you are in your sort of job journey. But in relation to like either if you're at resume writing and or job searching, like as y'all can see here, like no matter what role you're gonna be in at some sort of mental health tech company or something to that extent, there is always going to be a need for you to be really great about being a cross-functional collaborator. So in translating your current work experience over and working with others into cross-functional projects and successes, right? They're both the same thing. You just need to be able to speak to how you can see it as a cross-functional project and how it was a successful project. And so some of that can look like stories that bring in that cross-functional work with metrics, right? Showing the impact a lot. We heard a lot here about working cross-functionally to improve engagement or improve use of an app or something like that, right? Or thinking about in your work today, how are you doing that with others, and how are you measuring the success of what it is that you're working on with others? And that includes also bringing in stories on how to do conflict resolution, right? There's gonna, like I believe everyone's kind of mentioned to some extent, there's always these different teams that have different priorities. So there's always gonna be misalignment and there's always gonna be conflict. So how are you coming into that group of several different individuals that think very differently, and how are you getting them surrounded around one particular goal, expressing your concerns, highlighting their concerns, and coming to a mutual appropriate solution together that aligns across the goals for your company. And sort of like the way I've seen that phrase at 10 companies is that you're influencing other teams to buy into your vision and your perspective. It's kind of like the phrasing that's used there. And then, if you are on the job and you're already at a mental health tech company and you're there, what are ways that you can sort of be a better cross collaborator? One is just networking outside of your team and your department, right? A lot of times we tend to be siloed in. Learn from everyone else around you, engage with them. You never really know where you're going to have to interact with them. And having that relationship set up front just makes it even easier for when those resolutions and misalignments do show up. And then lastly is actually figuring out ways to bring those teams along on the work that you're doing. That's sort of how I've heard it phrased, but right, it's bringing them in where you're learning more about them to your team meetings. It's, learning from their expertise in order to grow in your own skill sets. I know, Karen, you mentioned this a little bit where you never really had user research experience. Some of that learning you did on your own, but right, maybe if you do have a user researcher in-house, you can learn some of that from them. And then lastly is including them in the work that you're doing as a way, even though it's not a part of their core responsibility, you can have much more diverse thought going into your product as well, which is always great. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump into question Q&As. I do have some questions I can kick off with, but I know we're at about 12 minutes, so I really would love to leave it for anyone else here who's attending to go ahead and ask questions. Feel free to raise your hands or drop them into the chat, and we'll get this started.
No questions? That's never happened. Did we do that good of a job?
All right, I'll dive into a question I had just to kick it off. So yeah, for the panel, what are, from your perspectives, what is one of the biggest takeaways you want folks here to have in relation to cross-functional work?
So I'll answer first then.
Karen?
I think you have to be massively curious, because it's easy to feel not in the right space when you're in tech or when you're in a startup. You can't just go from one job to the other. It's going to be the same. So you have to be driven by curiosity, because it keeps you from thinking that you don't know. You probably don't know, and that's fine in a startup world, in tech world. And the curiosity is something so positive that, as Mike said, you're going to go and say, hey, who can help me with this? Or I don't know about this. Who's going to give me a hand? And then put your energy in learning quick and fast, and trying, failing, and standing up again, rather than wasting time on worrying whether you're not good enough. I'm saying this because imposter syndrome is very, 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 very common in startups. And there's just no way to know everything. Especially when you have a psychology background, you're usually very good with people, and that's what you need to ride on. Being good with people. Developers, techies, they're not so good with people in general, but you are, and you can ask the questions and you can feel them on many levels. So if you take that and mix it with your curiosity and your willingness to learn, you're going to have a wonderful ride, whatever you decide to do.
Thanks, Karen. I'll jump in. And I was really going to say the same thing, is like, you can be an expert in your own field, but it doesn't mean that you're an expert in everything else. There's a reason why you are hiring other folks to take part in the project that you are working on and looking to build, and to really trust that you hired them for a reason, right? Or you're partnering them for a reason. So you want to trust their expertise. And the other thing that I'll say is always bring in your target audience when it comes to testing your product, getting input, what it is that you want to put out there. Everyone's needs are different, but you will always find a commonality, a common theme, and you'll be able to speak to that within the development of your product.
So we have one question in the chat. It says, can you speak more to the structure of your organization that allowed for this collaboration? Were product and clinicians in the same department? Did you report to the same person? Different? And if different, how did you start the collaboration process? I mean, I can talk since I'm off mute. In my organization, we are not in the same department, but oftentimes, because we are building a product that for patients that we are treating, they come to our meetings, like Mike said, they invite us to theirs. It is almost like, it's almost like it's gonna happen. Like, you don't even have to worry about like, how does it start? Like, they will come to you and ask you, and they will put time on your calendar and they'll ask you a bunch of questions. And it's not really about how it's allowed, it's what it is. Like, you are building something like was mentioned before, that I don't speak Python or whatever the other languages are Mike can speak to. Like I don't speak that. So what I can speak to, I just tell them, and then they then translate that into another language. And it feels really good. I mean, because you get to see like your final product, like, wow, like they really actually listen to me. And then even if they don't, then there's still room for improvement or for them to take on other suggestions. I know that that's what we have at Pomelo. We have a very open line of communication at any time. Like if you feel like there's a request that needs to be had, we use Slack, we have a request line. It is just kind of going into the job, you are kind of asked that in an interview, like, do you work well in a collaborative model? And I would always tell people that are going into tech interviews like this and that are clinicians is to just think about the interdisciplinary teams that you work with. If you worked in a hospital setting or on a college campus, that is the same exact thing. If you worked in a hospital, you didn't have to wait for the doctor or wonder if the doctor was going to come by and tell you anything. Like he showed up and he told you, and then you kind of collaborated. I feel like it's kind of the same way.
And I can speak to a little bit about my org structure. So within the Youth Innovation Lab, we are all under the Youth Innovation Lab, but we all have our individual teams. So we have our VP of Growth Hacker, who is our person who heads tech. And then you have the Digital Impact team, which houses our digital content, my team, which is digital well-being, our distribution team. And then when it comes to working with our external tech team, we have weekly meetings with them. And so there'll be one meeting to go over some updates on the current sprints and what's and our bugs that we've identified and the new features. And there's going to be another meeting in which there's the ideation piece happening with like cross collaboratively. So we'll bring to our tech team, like, this is what we're looking to have. This is why. They'll also give us their input and their ideas, again, from the user experience perspective. They're also asking us questions to know a little bit more as to why we want this feature, because it allows them to better build the product, right? Like never to be like, I don't think you need this, but to be like, okay, how can I meet everything that you're looking to get into this product this way? And then, yeah, I think that answers a little bit more about our team structure.
Can I say something to that, Patricia? What you said too is that engineering has always, like, they ask questions in a way that, and also to speak to what Karen said, that like, don't take it personally. Like they're not attacking your clinical work. They just really need to know how to build this thing. And so sometimes the questions are like, almost sometimes make it, they kind of try to dumb it down in a way. And like, it's like when I first started working in this field, I was like, wow, that was like a very, very, very basic question, but like they literally don't know. And they needed to know from you. Like you are your expert on what you are talking about as a clinician. So yeah, like those questions are like, I was kind of uncomfortable at first because they are like research questions, but in a whole different way. And I was like, wow, this is kind of a little bit too much. But I think like as you kind of work in these models, like you become more comfortable. Well, I hope so.
Yeah, I can only second what you just said, Jacqueline, because even if you're a small team, like we all work together, but we have a 0 meeting policy, which means there's no meetings. There is one meeting if you want once a week. And the expectation is that everyone kind of has a summary of what has been happening all week and presents it quickly. And even if you have no clue about AI or they have no clue about psychology, you still do it. And then you can follow up bilaterally, but you would never take a developer's time if you're not briefing him well. So we work a lot with Loom, which is like a video tool, so that we can express our thoughts and what we mean on that, and then then everyone can focus on their own stuff and look at it when they have time. This has proven very, very effective, and it's not about people not wanting to talk to you. But you have to make sure that that you over communicate, but in a way that's not getting on people's nerves. So you try to walk in their shoes, then you write down your ideas, you write down your requests, and you make it as slim and lean as possible, as clear as possible, as multidimensional as possible. And then you send it only to the person who you are actually wanting to do something with a clear call to action, etc., etc. And that way you can work into this with cross-functional in a very good way that is actually measurable, because then you can see, this has been done, this has been done, this has been tackled. And then the all hands meeting, if there is one, is actually just to kind of plan the future and see what has not been clear. Things that are clear are not discussed. So that's really what worked best for us. And again, developers and AI, machine learning people need hours, days of focus. So our way of communicating, like an exchange and having it's not their way. So we have to adapt a bit and they have to adapt a bit. And that's where you have a very good collaboration in a structure that doesn't have to be hierarchical.
Nice, thanks, Karen. Yeah, and I value the many different perspectives here, right? Because we can see how, depending on sort of like the stage that your company is at, like that cross collaboration is going to shift very dramatically also. I know we're coming to time. I'll leave it open to, if anyone has one more question, we can answer that. And please also, I did drop a link to a survey in our chat. If you could just please take 1 minute to fill that out, that would be greatly appreciated. It'll just help us to measure and make sure that this was the right event that y'all would want, but then also what other types of events similar to this y'all could be looking for. And thank you everyone. Cool. If anyone does have one more question, feel free to. Otherwise, I think we are ending. Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody.